Ryan Caldwell sat in his office on the 45th floor of Caldwell Media, staring out at the Chicago skyline. The city stretched before him, a mix of steel and glass under a gray March sky. At 38, he carried the weight of a CEO's life, his broad shoulders tense beneath a tailored suit. His phone buzzed, cutting through the silence. Mark, his assistant, spoke quickly. "Boss, the Nanny interview's in 30 minutes. Don't forget Izzy." Ryan rubbed his temples, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. Isabel, his 5-year-old daughter, nicknamed Izzy, was his world. But since Vanessa, his ex-wife, walked out when Izzy was a baby, he had been raising her alone. Work consumed him, contracts and deadlines piling up, leaving little time for bedtime stories or hugs. The scene shifted to his penthouse in downtown Chicago, all sleek lines and floor-to-ceiling windows. Nora Bennett stepped through the door, 32 years old, with a shy smile and a small leather bag slung over her shoulder. Her dark hair fell in soft waves, framing a face that seemed both gentle and guarded. Mark had vouched for her. "She's reliable, boss. My friend swears by her." Ryan barely looked up from his laptop, emails flashing across the screen. "Fine, you're hired," he said, voice clipped, eyes still on his work. Nora nodded, unfazed, and set her bag down quietly. Her first day began with Izzy. In the living room, Nora knelt beside the little girl, her blonde curls bouncing as they built a tower from colorful blocks. "Higher, Nora, higher," Izzy giggled, her blue eyes bright. Nora laughed, adding another block, then pulled out a song. "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," she sang, her voice clear and soothing, filling the sterile space with warmth. Later, in the kitchen, she mixed dough for chocolate chip cookies, letting Izzy stir with a tiny wooden spoon. The smell of baking wafted through the penthouse, a scent Ryan hadn't known since his own childhood. He came home late that night, loosening his tie as he stepped inside. The sight stopped him cold. Izzy ran to him, arms outstretched, her face lit with a joy he rarely saw. "Daddy, Nora made cookies," she chirped, tugging his hand. He followed her to the kitchen where Nora stood wiping flour from her hands, her apron dusted white. She looked up, meeting his gaze for a moment, and something stirred in him, a flicker of comfort he hadn't felt in years. "She's been like this all day," Nora said softly, a hint of pride in her tone. Ryan nodded, words caught in his throat. He watched Izzy grab a cookie, her laughter echoing, and realized the quiet loneliness of his home had shifted, just a little, with Nora there. For the next few days, he found himself noticing her more, the way she tied Izzy's shoes with care, the soft hum of her singing as she worked. He pushed the thoughts aside, chalking it up to gratitude. Izzy needed this, he told himself, a steady presence in her life. But as he stood in the doorway that night, watching Nora tuck Izzy into bed, he couldn't deny the pull. The penthouse felt less empty, and for the first time in years, Ryan wondered if he could let someone in again. Nora glanced back at him, her smile faint but real, and he turned away, heart thudding, unsure what it meant. 2 months slipped by in the Chicago penthouse, each day weaving Nora Bennett deeper into the fabric of Ryan Caldwell's life. She became Isabel's anchor, her small hands reaching for Nora at every turn. In the mornings, they sat cross-legged on the living room floor, painting rainbows on construction paper. Izzy's giggles filled the air as she smeared red across Nora's cheek, calling it her masterpiece. "You're silly," Nora said, laughing, wiping the paint with a sleeve. Evenings brought quiet moments, Nora braiding Izzy's blonde curls while telling stories of talking rabbits and brave princesses. Ryan watched from the sidelines when he could, his late nights at Caldwell Media softening with these glimpses of joy. He started coming home earlier some days, drawn by the pull of their routine. One Thursday, he found them in the kitchen, Nora stirring a pot of spaghetti sauce while Izzy perched on a stool, dropping noodles into boiling water. "Daddy, join us," Izzy called, waving a wooden spoon. Ryan hesitated, then rolled up his sleeves and stepped in, the trio moving in sync. Sauce splattered, laughter rose, and for an hour the penthouse felt like a home, not just a place to sleep. Nora caught his eye over Izzy's head, her smile warm, and Ryan felt a tug in his chest, a longing he hadn't named. A rainy night cemented it. Izzy fell asleep on the sofa between them, her head on Nora's lap, a blanket draped over her small frame. Rain tapped the windows, a steady rhythm against the silence. Ryan leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "I used to think I'd never get past it," he said, voice low. "Vanessa leaving, the way she just walked out. It's been me and Izzy ever since." Nora tilted her head, listening, her fingers brushing Izzy's hair. "You've done right by her," she replied, soft but sure. "She's happy, Ryan." He looked at her then, really looked, and saw more than a nanny. Her presence was steady, a light in the gray of his world. Their hands rested inches apart on the cushion, close enough to feel the unspoken. But cracks began to show. Nora grew cautious at odd times. Her answers clipped when he asked about her life before. "Where'd you grow up?" he tried once, casual over breakfast. "Oh, nowhere special," she said, turning to pour juice for Izzy, her back stiff. Another day he caught her scribbling on her phone in the hall, her brow furrowed, typing fast. She shoved it in her pocket when he approached, muttering about a shopping list. Suspicion flickered, but he brushed it off. Izzy adored her, and that mattered more than vague unease. Then came the moment that lingered. He arrived home early, briefcase still in hand, and found Nora in his study. She stood by his desk, snapping a photo of a paper he'd left out, a financial memo from Caldwell Media. Her eyes widened as he stepped in. "What's this?" he asked, voice sharp. She stammered, "Just a recipe I saw online, thought I'd save it." The lie hung thin between them, her fingers trembling as she tucked the phone away. Ryan frowned, searching her face, but Izzy's call from the living room broke the tension. "Nora, come see my drawing," she shouted, oblivious. Nora slipped past him, leaving the air heavy with questions he didn't voice. Nights later he lay awake, replaying it. The photo, her evasions, the way she deflected. He told himself it was nothing, a quirk of someone private, yet her laughter with Izzy, the softness in her eyes when they talked, pulled him closer. One evening they stood in the kitchen after Izzy's bedtime, dishes stacked in the sink. "You're good at this," he said, gesturing to the home she'd warmed, making it feel real. Nora paused, sponge in hand, and met his gaze. "It's easy with you too," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Their shoulders brushed as they worked, a fleeting touch that sent heat through him. He turned away, heart racing, torn between trust and the shadow of doubt. The next week he found himself lingering at home more, seeking her out. They watched movies with Izzy, shared coffee on the balcony, the city lights sprawling below. She told him small things, a love for jazz, a childhood memory of snow in Ohio, but never the full picture. He didn't push, not yet. One night she hummed Somewhere Over the Rainbow while folding laundry, and he joined in, their voices blending in the quiet. Izzy clapped from her blanket fort, delighted. "You sound like a family," she said, innocent and true. Ryan froze, the words sinking in, and Nora's cheeks flushed pink. They laughed it off, but the idea took root, fragile and unspoken. Still, the unease grew. He spotted her once, late at night, hunched over her phone in the guest room, typing furiously. She didn't hear him approach, didn't see him linger in the doorway. "Everything okay?" he asked, startling her. She nodded too quickly, shutting the screen off. "Just checking on a friend," she said, but her eyes darted away. Ryan let it slide, drawn back by Izzy's sleepy call for water. Yet, as he handed his daughter the glass, he couldn't shake the feeling that Nora held something back, something that might unravel the closeness he craved. Each smile she gave him, each gentle touch, came with a whisper of doubt, and he wondered how long he could ignore it. By the end of those 2 months, the penthouse was alive with her presence. Izzy thrived, her drawings taped to every wall, her voice brighter than ever. Ryan felt it too, a shift in himself, a softening he hadn't expected. Nora stood at the stove one evening, stirring soup, and he watched her, struck by how natural it felt. "Stay for dinner," he said, not a question. She nodded, and they ate together, Izzy chattering between them. Later, as she left for her room, he caught her wrist, brief and impulsive. "Thanks," he murmured, holding her gaze. She smiled, small and real, and slipped away. He stood alone in the kitchen, the echo of her warmth lingering, knowing he was falling, even as questions gnawed at him. The Chicago wind howled outside Ryan Caldwell's penthouse on a cold March morning, rattling the floor-to-ceiling windows. Inside, the air was still, heavy with routine. Isabel, or Izzy as they called her, bounced around the living room, her blonde curls wild as she waved a crayon drawing of a rainbow. "Look, Daddy, it's for school," she said, thrusting it at Ryan. He smiled, distracted, adjusting his tie for another day at Caldwell Media. "Beautiful, sweetheart," he replied, kissing her forehead. Nora Bennett moved quietly in the background, packing Izzy's lunch, her dark hair tied back, her presence a steady hum in the chaos of his life. He grabbed his briefcase, ready to leave, but paused when he couldn't find his car keys. "Izzy, where'd you put them?" he called, rifling through the kitchen counter. She giggled. "Maybe Nora has them." Ryan turned to Nora's bag, slung over a chair, and dug inside, expecting the familiar jingle. Instead, his fingers brushed a small, cold object, a digital recorder. Frowning, he pulled it out, pressed play, and froze. His own voice filled the room, crisp and unmistakable, from a call with his lawyer 2 days ago. "The quarterly numbers are off. We need to trace those accounts," he heard himself say, followed by static. His stomach dropped, eyes narrowing as he looked at Nora. She stood by the sink, rinsing a plate, oblivious until she turned and saw his face. "What's wrong?" she asked, voice light, but it faltered when she spotted the recorder in his hand. Ryan's jaw tightened. "What is this?" he demanded, holding it up. Her hands stilled, water dripping onto the counter. "Ryan, I can explain," she started, but he cut her off, stepping closer. "Who are you, some kind of spy?" His voice rose, sharp with betrayal, echoing off the marble floors. Izzy looked up from her drawing, wide-eyed, clutching her crayon tighter. Nora's face crumpled, tears welling as she sank onto a stool. "I'm not a spy," she said, voice breaking. "I'm a journalist, freelance. I was investigating Caldwell Media." Ryan stared, disbelief washing over him. "Investigating me? For what?" She took a shaky breath, wiping her eyes. "There were rumors of money laundering, big sums disappearing. I needed the story, Ryan. My mom, she's dying of lung cancer. $50,000 for treatment. It's all I don't have." Her words hit him like a punch, raw and desperate, but anger still burned hotter. "So you lied, used us," he snapped, slamming the recorder on the table. Izzy whimpered, "Daddy, don't yell," and ran to Nora, wrapping small arms around her legs. "Don't go, Nora," she cried, tears streaking her cheeks. Ryan's chest tightened, torn between his daughter's plea and the sting of deceit. He pointed to the door, voice cold. "Get out, now." But Izzy's sobs stopped him, her little body trembling as she clung to Nora. He raked a hand through his hair, exhaling hard. "You've got one chance," he said, low and strained. "Explain everything, or I call security." Nora nodded, swallowing hard, and sat Izzy on the couch with her drawing, whispering, "It's okay, sweetie, just color for a bit." She faced Ryan, eyes red but steady. "I took the job to get close to you," she began, hands twisting together. "Mark's friend didn't know me. I made up a story. I thought I'd find proof, write the article and sell it to pay for Mom's chemo. But then I met Izzy and you, and it changed." Her voice softened, pleading. "I couldn't do it, not after seeing how much she needs you, how hard you try." Ryan crossed his arms, jaw clenched, listening but unmoved. "Well, the recorder?" he asked, voice flat. She winced. "I was desperate at first, recording calls, taking pictures of papers. I stopped weeks ago, I swear. I couldn't hurt you." He picked up the device, scrolling through files, finding snippets of his voice from early days, then nothing recent. "You expect me to believe that?" he said, eyes hard. "You've been in my home, with my daughter, lying every day." Nora stood, stepping closer, her voice fierce through tears. "I stayed because I care, Ryan. I didn't send a word to anyone, check my phone, my laptop, anything." He wanted to throw her out, to erase the trust he'd built, but Izzy's quiet sniffles held him back. "Daddy, Nora's nice," she said, clutching her rainbow picture. Ryan looked at his daughter, then at Nora, her face open, vulnerable, nothing like the polished liars he'd faced in boardrooms. "Prove it," he said finally, voice rough. "Show me what you've got, or this ends here." Nora nodded, pulling her phone from her pocket, hands shaking as she unlocked it. She opened her notes app, revealing fragments of a story. Dates and numbers, but no draft sent. No emails to editors. Ryan scrolled through, his breathing uneven, anger mixing with confusion. "You had all this," he said, "and did nothing?" She met his gaze, unflinching. "I couldn't. Not to you, not to Izzy." He set the phone down, staring at her, the woman who'd filled his home with light, now standing in its shadow. "Why?" he asked, softer now, searching her eyes. "Because I fell for you," she whispered, barely audible, tears spilling over. "Both of you." Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken things. Ryan turned away, pacing to the window, the city sprawling below. He thought of Vanessa, her cold departure, the walls he'd built since. Nora had slipped past them, her laughter, her warmth, and now this. "I trusted you," he said, back to her, voice cracking. "I don't know if I can again." Nora stepped forward, tentative. "I'll go if you want, but I'm begging you to hear me out." "There's more." He turned, brow furrowed. "More?" She nodded, wiping her face. "It's not just me. It's about who's really behind this." He studied her, the tremble in her lips, the honesty in her eyes despite the lies. Izzy climbed off the couch, tugging his hand. "Don't be mad, Daddy," she said, her small voice cutting through his storm. He knelt, pulling her close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. "I'm not mad at you, baby," he murmured, then looked up at Nora. "Sit," he said, firm but not cruel. "Tell me everything." She sank onto the sofa, hands clasped, ready to unravel the rest. And Ryan braced himself, torn between the love he'd felt and the truth he feared. The morning light shifted, casting long shadows across the room. Nora took a deep breath, her voice steadying as she began again. "I found something bigger than I expected," she said, eyes locked on his. "It's not you they're after. It's someone else. Someone you'd never suspect." Ryan leaned forward, pulse quickening, knowing whatever came next would change everything. Izzy nestled beside Nora, coloring quietly, and for a moment the penthouse held its breath, waiting for the storm to break fully open. Ryan Caldwell stood in the living room of his Chicago penthouse, the morning light spilling through the windows, painting the floor in soft gold. Isabel, his 5-year-old daughter nicknamed Izzy, sat on the sofa, coloring her rainbow picture, her small tongue poking out in focus. Nora Bennett perched beside her, hands clasped tight, her dark eyes fixed on Ryan. The air crackled with tension after her confession. She was a freelance journalist who had infiltrated his life to uncover a scandal at Caldwell Media. His trust lay shattered, but Izzy's quiet presence kept him rooted, listening as Nora promised more. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling but resolute. "It's not just about the money for my mom," she said, glancing at Izzy, then back to Ryan. "I found something bigger while digging into your company. It's not you they're after, Ryan. It's Vanessa." He blinked, the name hitting like a stone. "My ex-wife?" he asked, voice low, disbelief threading through it. Nora nodded, pulling her phone from her pocket again, scrolling to a folder of screenshots. "Look at this," she said, handing it over. Ryan took it, his fingers brushing hers briefly, a jolt he ignored as he scanned the screen. Emails filled the display, terse exchanges between Vanessa and a man named Derek Holt, CEO of a rival media firm. Bank records followed, transfers of hundreds of thousands from Caldwell Media accounts to offshore shells, dated over the past 2 years. Ryan's brow furrowed, his mind racing. "What is this?" he muttered, scrolling faster. Nora leaned closer, her voice urgent. Vanessa didn't just leave you. She's been working with Holt to siphon money from your company, framing you for it. They've been at it since she lost custody of Izzy, planning to use it against you now that she's old enough for school. Ryan's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. She wants Izzy back? Nora nodded, her expression pained. She's been building a case, claiming you're unfit, that the company's a mess because of you. I found their plan in an email. She wants to take Izzy and ruin you in one move. He stared at the phone, the words blurring as anger surged. Vanessa's cold goodbye 5 years ago flashed in his mind. Her suitcase by the door, her refusal to look at their crying baby. She walked out. He said, voice rough, "Why now?" Nora swallowed. Money and control. Holt's her ticket. He set the phone down, pacing to the window, hands clenched. The Chicago skyline loomed, indifferent to the storm inside him. "You were going to expose this," he said, turning to her. "Sell it for your mom's treatment." Nora's eyes dropped, guilt shadowing her face. "At first, yes. $50,000, that's what I needed. I thought it'd be easy, a quick story, but then I got to know you, Izzy, this life. I couldn't do it." She looked up, tears brimming. "I stopped Ryan. I didn't send anything, didn't write a word past those notes." Izzy glanced between them, sensing the weight, and climbed into Nora's lap. "You're staying, right?" she asked, small hands gripping Nora's shirt. Nora hugged her tight, whispering, "I hope so, sweetie." Ryan watched, his heart twisting. "You had all this?" he said, gesturing to the phone. "And you did nothing?" She met his gaze, unflinching. "I couldn't hurt you. I deleted drafts, cut ties with my contacts. I chose you over her." Her voice broke on the last word, raw and honest. He sank into a chair, rubbing his face, the pieces falling into place. Vanessa's sudden calls last month, asking about Izzy's school plans, her vague threats about taking what's mine. He'd dismissed them as bluster, but now they glowed with intent. "She's been planning this for years," he said, almost to himself. Nora nodded. "I found out 2 weeks ago. I should have told you then, but I was scared you'd hate me." Ryan looked at her, the woman who'd filled his home with warmth, now bearing her soul. "I don't hate you," he said, quieter now. "But I don't know what to do with this." She stood, stepping toward him, her voice steadying. "Use it. Fight her. I've got everything, emails, records, timestamps. It's enough to stop her, keep Izzy safe." Ryan studied her, the fire in her eyes, the way she spoke of his daughter like her own. "And your mom?" he asked, softer. Nora's lip quivered. "She's out of time. I was going to lose her either way. But you and Izzy, you were worth more." The words hung there, a sacrifice laid bare, and Ryan felt something shift, a crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. He grabbed the phone again, reading through the evidence, his mind sharpening. "I've got a court date next week," he said, voice firming. "Vanessa's pushing for custody again. This could end it." Nora nodded, handing him a USB drive from her bag. "It's all there, backed up, take it." He took it, their fingers lingering for a second, a silent understanding passing between them. "Thank you," he said, meaning it, and she smiled faintly, tears still wet on her cheek. Hours later, Ryan stood in a courtroom downtown, the USB drive burning a hole in his pocket. Vanessa sat across from him, poised in a crisp blazer, her lawyer spinning tales of his neglect. Ryan's attorney presented the evidence, emails projected on a screen, bank records laid out like a map of betrayal. The judge's gavel fell, decisive, granting Ryan full custody and ordering an investigation into Vanessa's actions. She stormed out, her plan in ruins, and Ryan exhaled, relief flooding him. Izzy was his, safe. But his feet carried him elsewhere after. He drove to Mercy Hospital, the USB still in hand, and found the billing office. "Account for Alan Bennett," he said, pulling out his card. "Pay it in full, $50,000. The clerk blinked, processing the payment as Ryan stood silent, the weight of Nora's choice sinking in. He found her in her mother's room, Ellen frail but breathing, hooked to machines. Nora sat beside her, holding her hand, unaware of him until he stepped in. "Ryan?" she said, startled, standing up. I saw the evidence, he said, voice low. You saved us. Her eyes widened, searching his. You didn't have to come. He shook his head, stepping closer. You gave up everything for me and Izzy. I couldn't let you lose her too. Nora's breath caught, tears spilling again as she realized what he'd done. You paid it, she whispered, and he nodded, pulling her into his arms. She clung to him, sobbing into his chest, the hospital hum fading around them. I'm sorry, she murmured, and he tilted her chin up, wiping her tears. You're forgiven, he said, voice thick, and held her tighter, the city outside a distant murmur. They stood there, wrapped in each other, the betrayal of Vanessa fading against the truth of what Nora had given. Ryan felt her heartbeat against his, steady and real, and knew this was more than gratitude. It was trust rebuilt, a bond forged in sacrifice, and the beginning of something he hadn't dared hope for. Izzy's laughter echoed in his mind, and he saw a future, not just for his daughter, but for all three of them, rising from the ashes of secrets. Ryan Caldwell stood in the sterile glow of Mercy Hospital's 4th floor, the hum of machines a quiet backdrop. Nora Bennett clung to him, her arms tight around his chest, her tears soaking his shirt. The Chicago skyline glittered beyond the window, a mosaic of lights against the night sky. She pulled back, eyes red but wide with wonder, her voice a whisper. You paid it? All of it? Ryan nodded, his thumb brushing a tear from her cheek. $50,000. Your mom's safe now. Her breath hitched, a sob breaking free as she buried her face in his neck again. I don't know how to thank you, she murmured, trembling against him. He held her steady, feeling the warmth of her body, the weight of her relief. You don't have to, he said, voice low and thick. You saved Izzy, saved me from Vanessa. This is the least I could do. Nora looked up, her dark eyes searching his, a flicker of hope beneath the exhaustion. I thought I'd lost you, she said, soft and raw. After everything I did. Ryan shook his head, his hand resting on her shoulder. You didn't lose me. I was angry, hurt, but I see you now. The real you. She smiled faintly, fragile but real, and he felt his heart shift. A wall crumbling he hadn't known still stood. They stepped apart as a nurse entered, checking Ellen's chart. Nora's mother lay pale but breathing, her chest rising slow and steady. She's stable, the nurse said, offering a kind nod before leaving. Nora sank into the chair beside the bed, taking Ellen's hand, then glanced at Ryan. Stay? She asked, almost shy. He pulled up a chair, sitting close, their knees brushing in the small space. Silence settled, comfortable and heavy, the city's pulse outside a distant rhythm to their quiet. Hours passed, the night deepening. Ellen stirred once, her eyes fluttering open to see Nora, then Ryan. Who's this? She rasped, voice weak. Nora squeezed her hand. He's Ryan, Mom. He's why you're here. Ellen's gaze softened, a faint smile tugging her lips. Good man, she whispered, then drifted back to sleep. Ryan felt a flush creep up his neck, Nora's grateful look warming him more than words could. They sat there until dawn, sharing small glances, the bond between them growing in the stillness. Days later, back at the penthouse, life resumed with a new current. Izzy greeted Ryan at the door, her blonde curls bouncing as she hugged him. Did you win, Daddy? She asked, eyes bright. He scooped her up, grinning. Yeah, baby, we won. You're staying with me. She cheered, then ran to Nora, who stood in the kitchen stirring soup. Nora, you're staying too, right? Izzy asked, tugging her apron. Nora knelt, brushing a curl from Izzy's face. If your dad says so, she said, glancing at Ryan with a playful smile. He nodded, heart thudding. She's staying, he said, firm and sure. That night, after Izzy's bedtime, they lingered in the living room. The city glowed beyond the glass, a quiet witness. Ryan poured 2 glasses of wine, handing one to Nora. To new beginnings, he said, clinking her glass. She sipped, then set it down, stepping closer. I'm so sorry, Ryan, she said, voice low, for lying, for everything. He set his glass aside, taking her hands. "You're forgiven," he said, meaning it, his fingers lacing through hers. "You gave up your mom's chance for us. I can't forget that." Her eyes shone, wet and bright, and she leaned in, resting her forehead against his. The space between them vanished. He tilted her chin, kissing her softly, a tentative brush of lips that deepened as she pressed closer. Her hand slid up his chest, his arms circling her waist, the penthouse fading around them. It was gentle, real, a promise born from broken trust and rebuilt hope. They pulled back, breathless, her smile mirroring his. "I didn't expect this," she whispered. "Neither did I," he said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "But I want it." Weeks turned to months, their lives weaving tighter. Nora stayed on as Izzy's nanny, but it was more now, a partnership unspoken but felt. They cooked together, laughed over Izzy's antics, stole moments on the balcony with coffee and city lights. One evening, as summer warmed Chicago, Ryan watched Nora and Izzy dance in the living room, twirling to a jazz tune on the radio. Izzy spun into his arms, giggling. "Dance with us, Daddy," she said. And he did, pulling Nora close, their steps clumsy but perfect. The moment came on a quiet Friday. Izzy slept, the penthouse still. Ryan stood in the kitchen, Nora beside him drying dishes. He turned, heart pounding, and took her hand. "Marry me," he said, simple and sure, pulling a ring from his pocket, a silver band with a single diamond. Her eyes widened, then softened, tears pooling. "Yes," she whispered, nodding fast as he slid the ring onto her finger. She threw her arms around him, laughing through tears, and he kissed her, deep and fierce, the taste of her joy on his lips. Their wedding was small, intimate, held in Grant Park under a late summer sunset. Izzy pedaled her bike ahead, a basket of petals spilling behind her, her flower girl dress fluttering. Friends and family gathered, a handful of faces under the trees. Ryan wore a gray suit, Nora a white dress that flowed soft and simple. They stood before the officiant, hands clasped, exchanging vows. "I promise to trust you, to love you through everything," Ryan said, voice steady. "I promise to stand by you, to choose you every day," Nora replied, her smile radiant. Rings slipped on, a kiss sealed it, and Izzy cheered, racing her bike in circles. After, they walked the park, Izzy between them, holding their hands. "We're a family now," she said, swinging their arms. Ryan looked at Nora, her face glowing in the fading light, and squeezed her hand. "Yeah, we are," he said, pulling them both close. The city hummed around them, alive and vast, but in that moment, it was just the three of them, a unit forged from chaos and love. Nora leaned into him, her ring catching the last rays of sun, and Ryan knew this was his forever, a life he'd never dared dream of until her. Back at the penthouse, they celebrated quietly. Ryan offered Nora a job, editor at Caldwell Media, handing her a contract over dessert. "You're too good to just be our nanny," he said, grinning. She laughed, signing it with a flourish. "Only if I get to keep you too," she teased, and he pulled her into a kiss, Izzy clapping from her chair. The night ended with them on the balcony, arms around each other, the city sprawling below. "We made it," Nora whispered, and Ryan nodded, holding her tight, the past a shadow they'd outrun together. The Chicago penthouse glowed with the soft light of a late summer evening, its sleek lines softened by the warmth within. Ryan Caldwell stood in the kitchen, slicing a pizza fresh from the oven, the scent of pepperoni and cheese filling the air. Isabel, his 5-year-old daughter nicknamed Izzy, sat at the table, her blonde curls tied back with the ribbon from the wedding earlier that month. She swung her legs, humming "Somewhere Over the Rain" in a high, lilting voice, her crayons scattered beside a half-finished drawing of a family, 3 stick figures under a bright sun. Nora Caldwell, now his wife, poured glasses of water, her silver wedding band glinting as she moved, a quiet smile on her lips. They had settled into this life, a rhythm built from the ashes of secrets and rebuilt trust. The wedding in Grant Park felt like yesterday, Izzy pedaling her bike with a basket of petals, Ryan and Nora exchanging vows under the fading sun. Now, here they were, a family in the truest sense, the penthouse no longer a hollow shell, but a home alive with laughter and love. Ryan slid the pizza onto plates, handing one to Izzy. "Extra cheese for my girl," he said, ruffling her hair. She grinned, taking a big bite, sauce smearing her chin. "Yummy, Daddy," she mumbled, and he chuckled, wiping her face with a napkin. Nora joined them, setting the water glasses down, her dark eyes catching his across the table. She wore a simple sweater, her hair loose, and Ryan thought she'd never looked more beautiful. "Good day at the office?" she asked, sipping her water. He nodded, leaning back in his chair. "Better now, first day with my new editor didn't disappoint." She smirked, a playful glint in her gaze. "She better not. I hear she's tough." Izzy piped up, "Nora's the boss now, right?" They laughed, and Ryan reached for Nora's hand under the table, squeezing it gently. "She's always been the boss," he said, voice warm, and she squeezed back, her touch a silent anchor. The meal unfolded with easy chatter. Izzy told them about her day at kindergarten, a story about a lost crayon and a new friend named Timmy. "He likes rainbows too," she said, beaming. Nora listened, nodding along, then added, "Maybe we can invite Timmy over, make some rainbow cookies." Izzy clapped, bouncing in her seat. "Yes, please." Ryan watched them, his heart full, marveling at how seamlessly Nora fit, how she turned his daughter's world brighter, and his own too. The memory of Vanessa's betrayal, the court battle, the lies, felt distant now, a storm they'd weathered to find this peace. After dinner, they cleared the table together, a quiet dance of routine. Izzy darted to the living room, pulling out a board game, Candyland, her favorite. "Play with me," she begged, tugging Ryan's sleeve. He groaned dramatically, again, but sat on the floor, Nora joining them with a grin. They took turns drawing cards, Izzy giggling as she raced her gingerbread man to the finish. "I win," she shouted, throwing her arms up, and Ryan scooped her into a hug, tickling her until she squealed. Nora watched, laughing, her hand resting on Ryan's shoulder, a touch that grounded him. Later, with Izzy tucked into bed, the penthouse grew still. Ryan stood in the kitchen, washing the last dish, when Nora slipped behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "She's out like a light," she said, her cheek pressed against his back. He dried his hands, turning to face her, pulling her close. "You're good at this," he murmured, resting his forehead against hers. "The mom thing," she smiled, soft and real. "It's easy with her, with you." He kissed her then, slow and deep, tasting the sweetness of her lips, the promise they'd made in Grant Park echoing between them. They moved to the balcony, the city sprawling below, a sea of lights under a velvet sky. Nora leaned against the railing, her sweater catching the breeze, and Ryan stood beside her, his arm around her shoulders. "We made it," she said, voice barely above a whisper, her eyes on the horizon. He nodded, pulling her tighter, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his side. "Through everything," he replied, his voice thick with emotion, the lies, the fight, all of it. "You're my home, Nora." She turned to him, tears glistening, and kissed him again, a quiet vow in the night air. The city hummed below, alive and vast, but up here, it was just them. Ryan thought of the past, Vanessa's cold exit, the years of raising Izzy alone. Then Nora came, with her secrets and her sacrifice, turning his world upside down and right side up again. He remembered the hospital, her tears when he paid for her mom's treatment, the courtroom victory that kept Izzy his. Every step had led here, to this balcony, this woman, this life. "I love you," he said, simple and true, and she smiled, resting her head on his chest. "I love you too," she whispered, her voice a melody he'd never tire of. Inside, Izzy slept, her drawing of their family taped to the fridge a testament to what they'd built. Ryan glanced at it through the glass door, 3 stick figures under a sun, and felt a peace he hadn't known possible. Nora's hand slipped into his, fingers lacing together, and they stood there, watching the city, the future stretching out before them. "Thank you," he said, turning to her, his voice soft, for coming into our lives. She looked up, eyes shining. Thank you for letting me stay, she replied, and they held each other, the night wrapping them in its embrace, a family complete at last.